Colorado Territory. 1879, thunder cracked over the San Juan Mountains as the ground shuddered beneath her boots, and Tessa Allard realized the mine was collapsing. She screamed, but the sound drowned in the roar of splintering timber and falling stone. Her lantern flew from her hand, crashing against the tunnel wall. Darkness swallowed her whole. She dropped to the ground, arms covering her head, heart beating like a war drum. "Tessa!" A man's voice rang down the shaft, deep, panicked, close. "Elia," she choked, coughing through the dust. "I'm here." The wooden beams above her groaned again, a low, angry sound that made her blood run cold. She tried to crawl, but something heavy pinned her ankle. Pain sparked up her leg. She cried out. Boots pounded on the rocks. Then strong hands were on her, brushing dirt from her face. A flicker of lantern light cut through the haze, catching on familiar blue eyes and a square jaw streaked with grime. "You don't get to die on me," Elia Trenton said, voice low and fierce, bending over her. "Not you." He slid his arms under her, lifting her like she weighed nothing. She clung to his neck, her face pressed into his shoulder as the mine groaned again behind them. He ran, fast and sure-footed, through the pitch-black shaft. Rocks rained down around them. The final beam cracked as they cleared the tunnel, daylight blinding after so much dark. They tumbled onto the dirt outside as the mine mouth collapsed behind them with a deafening crash. Elia did not let go. He held her close, breathing hard, his arms locked around her like he would never let her go again. Tessa's breath hitched, every part of her shaking. "You came for me." "I always will," he said. They sat together on a flat rock overlooking the valley as the sun dipped low, painting the sky gold and crimson. Elia's coat was wrapped around her shoulders. Her ankle throbbed, but she was alive. The mine was gone, the entrance buried under tons of rock, but she was alive. "When did you get back?" she asked softly. "Last night. Rode in from Gunnison. Heard you were working the east shaft alone." He shook his head, jaw tight. "Damn foolish thing, Tess. I had to. The company's not paying for shipments that come in late. If I do not get the quartz out, we cannot keep the claim." "You could have waited," he said, "or asked for help." "From who?" "The other men won't work with a woman. They think I should be cooking stew and darning socks." "They are fools," he said simply. She looked at him, really looked. He was older, 30 now, maybe. The boy she remembered had grown into a broad-shouldered man who moved with quiet strength. Dust lined the creases near his eyes, but his gaze was clear. "You look like hell," she said. "So do you." She smiled just a little. "Thank you for pulling me out." He did not answer right away. Then, voice low, he said, "I thought I lost you. I have not been that scared since." "Ever." A silence settled between them, heavy with things unsaid. The last time they stood this close, they were 19 and heartbroken, standing beside her father's grave. He had left the next morning, chasing cattle and distance. "Why did you leave?" she asked. His head dropped. "Because I was 17 and scared. Your father hated me. I had nothing but a saddle and a bad reputation. I never hated you. I know that now." She looked away at the distant peaks catching the last light. "I am not the same girl. I am not the same boy," he said. "But I still want the same thing." She looked back at him, heart thudding. "Which is?" "You." He said it without hesitation, plain, honest. "After all this time, I never stopped." She swallowed, throat tight. "I do not know what to do with that. Start with letting me stay." They returned to her cabin as dusk settled over the valley. The place was small but solid, 2 rooms, a stone hearth, and a bed tucked behind a curtain. Elia built a fire while Tessa changed into clean clothes, her ankle wrapped tight. When she came out, he had the kettle boiling and a plate of beans and cornbread on the table. She stared at him. "You remembered how I like my tea." "Of course I did." She sat carefully, watching him across the table. "You planning to stay in town? Depends on if you want me here." Her eyes did not leave his. "I think I do." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. Her hand turned, palm meeting his. Warmth bloomed in her chest. "I missed you," she said. He smiled then, just a little. "You do not have to do this alone anymore." Her throat tightened. She had been alone so long she forgot what it felt like to be seen like this. "I do not know how to stop," she said honestly. "I will help you learn." That night she woke to a nightmare, timber cracking, dust choking her lungs. She sat up gasping, hands clenched in the quilt. Elia was there in seconds, kneeling beside the bed. "Tessa." "I am here." She reached for him without thinking, and he caught her in his arms. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of pine and ash and safety. "I thought I was back in the mine," she whispered. "I know." He stroked her hair, slow and steady. "But you are not. You are here." "With me." She pulled back just enough to look at him. His eyes searched hers, and something passed between them, quiet and certain. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deeper, full of every year they had lost and every second they had just gotten back. When he pulled away, his forehead rested against hers. "I love you, Tess." Her heart ached, but this time it was a good ache, one that healed. "I love you too, Elia." The first snow arrived early that year, brushing the edge of October with white. It came light, at first a hush of flurries drifting through the pines, clinging to fence rails and blackening the mud along the trail leading from Tessa's cabin to the town proper. By morning the ground was hard with frost, and Elia was out splitting kindling before the sun rose. Tessa leaned against the doorway, wrapped in her shawl, watching the steady rhythm of his axe. The wood sighed apart beneath it, steam rising from the cut. She didn't speak. Just listened to the quiet thud, the breath of wind through the trees, and the soft sound of him working like he'd done it every day of his life in that yard. "You built up my whole stack," she said at last, voice low from sleep. "I didn't think you'd mind." Her lip curved, but only slightly. "You planning to take over all my chores?" "No," he said, setting another log on the stump. "Just the ones that keep you off that ankle." She stepped out into the cold, testing her weight. The healing was slow, but it came. "It'll be better before winter sets in." "Maybe," he said, not looking up. "But you don't need to rush it." She folded her arms. "I'm not a woman built for resting." "You're not built to be buried in a rockslide either," he said, splitting the log clean. A silence settled in again, and she let it. There was something comforting in it, that he didn't fill every quiet with words. He just stayed, steady as the mountains, and let her breathe. Later, they rode into town together, her mule and his bay gelding picking through the muddy road. The mining office sat crooked at the end of the street, its windows still boarded from the last hailstorm. Tessa slid down from her saddle, jaw firm. "You sure you want to go in there today?" Elia asked. "He needs to see I'm not dead," she said. "And that I'm not quitting." The foreman, a wiry man with tobacco-stained teeth, blinked when he saw her. "Heard you were near crushed," he said. "Not crushed," she said, "and not finished. You can't work that shaft anymore, it's closed." "I figured, but the south tunnel's still sound." "I've surveyed it. That vein's shallow. It's quartz-rich," she said, pulling a folded paper from her coat. "You left the records behind when you moved operations east." He looked at her, then passed her to Elia. "You bringing your man now? He's not mine," she said, calm and clear. "He's a partner." Elia didn't flinch, just met the man's gaze. The foreman hesitated, then gave a short nod. "You want that shaft, it's yours, but you're responsible for it. No liability." "I never asked for any." Back on the street, Elia walked beside her in silence. When they reached the horses, he said, "You didn't have to say that about me. It's true. I wouldn't leave, Tess, not again. I know. She swung into the saddle, wincing only slightly. Come on, I want to check the water lines before freeze. He mounted up beside her and they rode on. That night, Tessa worked at the table while Elia read by the hearth, boots off, feet stretched toward the fire. Her maps were spread across the boards, the lantern casting shadows on the ink. She marked fault lines, calculated distances, and measured timber strength. She didn't look up until he spoke. I saw your mother's name on that deed. You kept the claim in her name. She earned it, Tessa said, not pausing her pencil. She was the one who taught me how to swing a pick. She passed the year I left. She died in spring, Tessa said. You were gone before the thaw. He didn't answer. She set her pencil down, finally meeting his eyes. I don't blame you, I just remember. I should have written. You didn't. And I got through it. You shouldn't have had to. She looked at him for a long time, then said, You can't change it, he nodded slowly, but I can stay now. She didn't look away. Then stay. He crossed the room, slow and careful, and sat beside her. His hand rested on the table near hers, not touching, just there. She didn't move away. They stayed like that a long while, the fire snapping low behind them, the night wind whispering against the window glass. When she finally stood to stoke the fire, he rose too. You know, she said, setting another log on the coals, I never meant to stay here forever. Where would you go? She looked into the flames. North, maybe. There's silver in Idaho, or find a town that needs a smith. My father taught me enough to keep a forge running. Elia crouched beside her. You'd leave Colorado, I thought about it, after the mine caved in. I didn't want to look at these hills anymore, but you're still here. I didn't want to go alone. He didn't touch her, but his voice was quiet. You wouldn't have to. She didn't answer right away. Then she turned to him, eyes lit orange by the fire. Would you follow me? He tilted his head. Anywhere. She nodded once, and that was enough. They banked the fire and turned in. No words passed between them as they lay down, but her hand found his beneath the quilt, and his fingers curled around hers. Neither of them let go. 2 weeks passed under a sky the color of pewter, the kind that never quite turned bright no matter how late the morning stretched. The valley settled into the hush that came before true winter. No birdsong, no wind, only the creak of trees and the muffled crunch of boots over frost-hardened ground. Elia tore down the rotted boards over the south tunnel's mouth, while Tessa measured timber lengths in the snow-dusted clearing behind the cabin. Her crutch leaned against a stump. She still favored the bad ankle, but the swelling had gone down, and she moved easier now, more sure of her footing. She didn't mention the ache, and he didn't ask. When the tunnel stood open again, they walked its length together, lanterns held low, their breath fogging in the still air. The walls shimmered faintly, thin veins of quartz catching the flicker of flame. Elia tested the supports, pressing his weight into the beams she'd already braced. She watched him from the corner of her eye, noting how he ran his hand along the grain like he was reading the wood's memory. You ever think about running a mine yourself? She asked, keeping her voice low in the close air. He glanced back, one brow raised. Never figured I had the patience. Or the math. You've got the steadiness. Steadiness won't keep a tunnel from caving. Neither will working alone, she said, brushing dust from a crossbeam. He turned to face her fully, lantern casting shadows across his jaw. You planning to hire me? I'm not offering wages. Then what are you offering? A life, she said. One that doesn't leave when the first snow sticks. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, You want to build something here or just hold it together? I don't know yet, she admitted. But I want to find out. They emerged from the shaft as the light faded, the sun slipping behind the ridge. Snow had begun to fall again, thin, slanted lines that melted on their skin. Tessa tilted her face toward it. eyes shut. And for a moment, Elijah just looked at her, as though seeing something he hadn't let himself before. That night, after supper, she unwrapped a parcel from the shelf above the hearth, a folded leather-bound ledger with yellowing pages and her mother's neat, slanted hand. She set it on the table and opened it to a page marked with a pressed flower, long since browned and brittle. She kept records of every load pulled from the claim, Tessa said, tapping the numbers, even when it was just her and me and one borrowed cart. Elijah studied the page. You trusted her. I still do. He leaned back, voice quiet. And you trust me. I'm trying, she said. That's more than I've given anyone in years. He nodded slowly, gaze never leaving hers. I'll earn the rest. The next day came with a wind sharp enough to sting. They worked through it, shoulders hunched, sleeves rolled tight, hands raw from rope and rock. Tessa's plans for a new hoist required a pulley system they didn't have. So Elijah rode out to a ranch 5 miles east where an old barn had collapsed the previous spring. He came back with iron brackets, a length of chain, and a grin that reached his eyes for the first time in days. She met him at the gate. You steal that? Traded for it. For what? 2 mended stirrups and a bottle of rye I'd forgotten in my saddlebag. Fair deal, she said, and took the chain from his hand. Late in the evening, when the wind died down and the fire settled into coals, they sat on the floor with her maps spread between them. Elijah traced a ridge line with one finger, then pointed to a narrow cut in the side of the hill. There's a spring here. It'll freeze, but not solid. Be good for runoff come thaw, she glanced at him. You remember all that from one ride. Some things stick, she nodded, folding the map carefully. I want to build a sluice system next spring. Small scale, just enough to separate sediment. He leaned back, arms around his knees. You're thinking long term. She met his gaze. I'm not going anywhere. Something settled between them then, quiet and certain, not hurried, not declared, just known. Before they turned in, Elijah paused at the window, watching the snow drift against the glass. Did you ever think, he said, not turning, that maybe we both needed time to become the people we're supposed to be? She stood in the doorway, lamplight catching the curve of her shoulder. I think I needed to survive first. And now I want something more than surviving. He crossed the room slowly. When he reached her, he didn't touch her, not right away. He just looked at her, steady and sure. She stepped forward, closing the space between them. Her hand found his, fingers threading together. He said nothing. He didn't need to. She led him to bed. Not with urgency, but with something deeper, a tenderness not rushed by years lost. They undressed by the fire's glow, quiet and deliberate, and when they lay down, it was with the reverence of people who had nearly lost everything and learned to hold what remained with care. After they lay still, her head on his chest, his hand resting at the curve of her back. He traced slow circles there, breath warm against her hair. I don't want to wake up alone anymore, she whispered. You won't. Outside, the snow thickened. Inside, the night stretched soft and long, 2 heartbeats moving in time. The first week of December arrived under a sky so low it felt like it pressed against the tops of the pines. The wind no longer gusted, it scraped. Tessa's breath fogged as she stepped out before dawn, shoulders hunched into her coat, a canvas sack slung over one arm. Behind her, the door creaked shut, and Elijah's footsteps followed without a word. They walked the ridge above the cabin, packs light but tools in hand. A narrow trail cut along the slope where Tessa had once tethered a sled and hauled gravel alone. Now, she stopped beside a half-frozen stream and crouched, her gloved fingers brushing away the crust of ice forming at its edges. Water's slowing, she said. Elijah scanned the tree line. We'll need to stack more stone at the bend. Keep the runoff from pooling where it shouldn't. Tomorrow, she said. "Today we dig." The new shaft sat higher up the hill, nestled in a fold of earth where the rock bent shallow and the quartz showed in broken teeth. Tessa had marked it weeks before but hadn't touched it, not until the south tunnel was reinforced and the hoist came together. Now, with snow climbing the trees and the valley hardening into winter, they began again. They worked until midday, shovels biting into frozen ground, hands stiff and shaking by the time they paused. Tessa sat on a flat stone, opening the sack to reveal a wedge of cheese and a paper-wrapped heel of bread. Elia knelt opposite her, his hands raw from rope. "You ever think about selling it?" he asked. "The claim, I mean." She chewed a moment before answering. "Sometimes. Not because I want to, just wondering what it'd mean." "What would it mean?" "That I gave up my mother's work. That I stopped before I knew what I could make of it." He nodded, tearing off a corner of bread. "I don't want to see you worn down by it." "I'm not worn down," she said. "I'm building something." He looked at her then, really looked. "You're not just trying to prove something anymore, are you?" She shook her head. "No, I'm trying to live." They finished the meal in silence, the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty. Afterward, Tessa opened a small wooden box she'd pulled from her pack. Inside were iron nails, short lengths of wire, and a folded page of measurements. Elia raised a brow. "That from the blacksmith in Silverton. Traded for it last week," she said. "He owed me for sharpening his chisels last summer. You're still doing forge work, when I can." "I've got a bellows tucked in the shed under a tarp." He leaned back on his heels. "You ever think about building a real forge? I'd need stone, iron stock, a roof." "That's not a no." She met his gaze. "It's not." That evening she laid the plans out on the table: the forge, the sluice, the shaft expansion. Elia stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes moving slow over the sketches. She didn't speak. She let him take it in. "You don't just want to work this land," he said. "You want to shape it. I want it to last." He reached for the edge of the drawing, thumb brushing the lines. "I could get more timber from the basin near Cold Creek. There's a stand of pine no one's touched since the washout." "It's a day's ride," she said. "I'd be back by the next." She turned toward him, her brow furrowing. "You don't have to take it on, I know. You're not proving anything either." "I'm not trying to." He paused. "I just want to build it with you." The fire crackled low beside them. She stepped in close, her fingers brushing his shirt near the buttons. "I don't know how to do this quiet." "You don't have to," he said. "You just have to do it honest." Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. "I'm scared of losing it, all of it. You, this place. What we've started." "So am I," he said. "But that doesn't mean we stop." They stood like that for a moment, the kind that stretches without needing to be filled. Then she leaned her forehead into his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her steady. The next morning he rode out before light, saddle creaking under cold leather, his breath a ghost behind him. She watched from the porch, fingers wrapped around a tin cup gone lukewarm. By afternoon she was hauling lumber from the shed, measuring with her mother's string line, marking the frostbitten ground where the forge would stand. Her ankle ached, but she didn't slow, not this time. When Elia returned the following dusk, leading a second horse piled with pine logs, she was waiting with a lantern lit and a foundation marked in stone. He stepped down, face wind-burned and smiling. "Didn't expect you to start without me. I told you I'm not waiting anymore." He untied the first bundle, shoulders relaxing as he looked at what she'd laid out. "You're sure about this?" She straightened, wiping her hands on her coat. "I've never been more sure of anything." He walked to her then, slow across the snow, and kissed her with the kind of quiet certainty that asked nothing, only offered. And this time, she kissed him back like she meant to stay. The forge took shape over the following weeks, not quickly, but with intention. Tessa laid each stone herself, hands steady even when her fingers cracked from cold. Elia built the framework with pine he'd hauled from the basin, and neither of them spoke much as they worked. They didn't need to. The rhythm had settled between them like a second heartbeat. By late December, the walls stood waist-high and the roof beams were shaped and stacked, ready for raising when the ground thawed. They'd built up a stockpile of cut timber and spare nails, tucked beneath tarps weighted with stone. The hoist at the south shaft groaned under its own weight but held, and the sluice troughs were stacked near the stream, waiting for spring melt. Inside the cabin, warmth clung to every board, smoke curling from the chimney even on windless nights. Elia had carved a new latch for the back door, and Tessa had sewn thick curtains from old wool bolts she'd traded for flour. Nothing was fancy, but everything was cared for. One evening after supper, Elia leaned back in his chair, a folded letter in his hand. The firelight caught the edge of the page. "You been holding on to that long?" Tessa asked. He glanced at her, then turned the letter over. "Since I left Gunnison. You never opened it?" "I couldn't. Not until I knew where I belonged." She set down the tin cup in her hand. "Whose is it?" "My sister's, Clara. She wrote me after her boy was born. That was 4 years ago." Tessa's brow lifted. "You didn't know." "I knew. Word travels, but I didn't want to read it from paper." He paused. "I wasn't ready to face what I'd missed." "You think you are now?" He unfolded the letter slowly, eyes scanning the page. His expression softened, lines around his eyes easing. After a long moment, he handed her the sheet. "She says they're settled near Trinidad now. Her husband runs a trading post. She wants me to come visit, bring you if I've got someone." Tessa read the lines carefully, then placed the letter on the table. "Do you want to go?" "I want to stay here," he said, "but I want her to know I'm all right. That I've finally found a place to put my hands to the earth and mean it." She reached across the table, brushing the back of his hand. "Then write her. Tell her everything." He nodded, quiet, and stood. He crossed to the shelf near the hearth, pulled down the stub of a pencil and a half-used ledger. No hesitation this time. The days shortened ahead of the solstice, and with the forge walls holding firm, they turned their efforts indoors. Tessa cleared space near the back window and began shaping iron hooks from scrap, heating them in the cookstove's flame. Elia fitted hinges to a cabinet he'd built from pine. They spoke less of what came next and more of what simply was what beans needed soaking, how the light fell different in the afternoons, what birds nested in the eaves. One morning she found him kneeling in the snow behind the cabin, hammering a frame into the ground. It was a rectangle of rough wood, no more than waist-high. "What's that?" "Garden bed," he said, not looking up. "South-facing. Good drainage." She stepped closer, arms folded to her chest. "You don't even like carrots." "I like the way you talk about them." She didn't answer, but the quiet that followed was full of something gentle and deep. That night, she sat beside him on the bed, her hair still damp from washing, fingers brushing the edge of his shirt sleeve. "I didn't think I'd ever share this place," she said. "Not really. I thought I'd just hold it together long enough to say I tried." His hand found hers. "You did more than try." She looked at him, and there was no hesitation in the way she leaned into him. Their kiss wasn't new, but this one held something settled. A promise, unspoken but understood. Winter laid heavy across the valley, but inside the cabin, warmth built with every passing day. Tessa carved a sign to hang above the forge door once the roof was on. Elia sanded it smooth, then burned the letters in with a tempered nail. They didn't argue over the name. It wasn't even a discussion. Allard and Trenton. The first time they rode into town together after the thaw, no one stared. The mine foreman nodded and handed over the spring records without a word. Tessa signed them with a steady hand. Elia stood beside her as though he'd always belonged there, They passed through the mercantile on the way out. She bought a length of calico in a soft green. He picked up a spool of wire and a block of salt for the mule. Neither said anything about the way their hands brushed when they reached for the coin purse at the same time. Later that night, after the fire had burned low and the windows fogged with early spring damp, Elia traced the curve of her shoulder beneath the quilt. "I've been thinking," he said, voice rough from sleep, "about building a second room off the back." She stirred, turning toward him. "For what? Whatever we need. A workroom or a cradle." She didn't speak, but her hand settled over his chest, fingers resting just above his heart. "We're ready?" he asked. "I think we already started," she said. "The forge roof went up in April." They raised it together, bracing beams with ropes and sweat, hammering the last shingle down as the rain started to fall. Tessa lit the first flame 2 days later. Elia stood beside her, watching the smoke rise into the new chimney. By midsummer, the sluice was running clean and steady. The new garden bed bloomed with peas and snap beans, and a second room stood framed and roofed behind the cabin. Inside, a table was set for 2. Outside, the hills ran green and gold. Elia brought home a dog from the next valley, a mutt with one ear chewed ragged and a bark like a cracked bell. Tessa named him Flint. They buried a fence line along the ridge. They planted lilacs along the south side of the forge. When they argued, it was about things like hoe handles and where to stack the ash barrel. When they kissed, it was never hurried. They never left. Years passed like pages turning slow and sure. The forge never sat cold. The mines yielded enough to keep their hands full, but never so much they lost sight of what mattered. People came to trust the Allard and Trenton name. Some came to stay. A town grew steadier for it. And at night, when the fire burned low and the valley lay quiet beneath the stars, Tessa would rest her head against Elia's shoulder, and he would hold her like he had that first night, without words, without doubt. They built more than a home. They built a life, together, always.